Hello and welcome. The challenge for this video is to prove that humans were designed by a non-human intelligence. Since I'm using the word prove, I want to make sure I define what I mean by that word. I like the definition provided in one of my college textbooks regarding proofs. The authors answer the question, how formal do proofs need to be? Quote, the answer to this question is not easy. The bottom line regarding proofs is that their purpose is to convince someone, whether it is a grader of your classwork or yourself, about the correctness of the strategy you are using in your code. If it is convincing, then it is enough. If it fails to convince the consumer of the proof, then the proof has left out too much. End quote. So, if you're not convinced, then it's either because I am mistaken or I've left out too much. So I'd like to know where I can improve my proof or how I'm mistaken. I'd like to begin by considering a quote from a prominent physicist, Paul Davies, in which he defines life by its information processing capabilities. Quote, for me, the most important thing is about the information processing capabilities, because I know of nothing other than life, or the products of life, like computers, that process what we might call semantic or contextual information. So that to me seems to get closest to the heart of what is really weird about life. End quote. Why is it weird that all life requires the processing of semantic information? Paul Davies does not specify, as if it is obvious. Maybe it is. What do we already know? Let's think about his comment regarding computers being the products of life. He is correct. However, can't we be more specific than that? We'd still be correct to say only life and the products of humans, like computers, are capable of processing semantic or contextual information. What else do we know? We know that humans are the only organisms capable of producing computers, specifically because of our intelligence. It's our intelligence that distinguishes us from the other animals. So when we see a computer sophisticated enough to process contextual information, we know it came from an intelligent source, like humans. There's nothing religious about this inference. This is derived from our repeated and uniform experience. So couldn't we be even more specific and say only life and the products of intelligence, like computers, are capable of processing semantic or contextual information? That still sounds pretty reasonable. We know the origin of things like books and computers, and that they are products of intelligence 100% of the time. It seems odd to assume that life, for which we don't know the origin, would be a product of anything other than intelligence, because life is capable of processing contextual information. When the known occurrences of machines capable of processing contextual information have a 100% track record of being products of intelligence, it seems fair to say that the potential cause for the origin of living organisms, such as a human, is far more likely to be intelligence than any other cause. But is there any way to know with certainty? Let's see if there's anything useful in our knowledge of how computer programs process information. This is one of the first examples I was taught in my introduction to computer programming in college. The example was looking at a sample of code known as the swap function. The objective of the swap function is to swap two numbers, each stored in a separate physical location in computer memory. So what does the algorithm look like in pseudocode? Well, this is the way it was taught to me. We start with two variables, just like in algebra. These variables can hold numbers. And we define our swap function to take two variables and perform some operations on those variables. So let's say we have two starting variables, and A is initialized to the value of 3 and B is initialized to the value of 7. So our swap function is defined as set A equal to B, set B equal to A. What is the result of the information processing performed by our code? We see the result would be A equals 7 and B also equals 7. Notice we've lost the value of 3 because when A is set equal to B, it replaces the value stored in A. Then B is set equal to that value of 7 instead of the intended value of 3. So how do we resolve this problem? Let's define our swap function again, and this time we'll use a temporary variable. This time when the swap function is called, the first operation performed by our new swap function is to set the temporary variable to the value of A. Then the variable a is set to the value of b, and the variable b is set to the value of the temporary variable. Now the result of our information processing will be a now has the value of 7, and b now has the value of 3. Notice the original pseudocode was written incorrectly. This is the way it was taught to me as well, to demonstrate a point. The temporary variable is meant to teach us about something known as functional necessity, and this example shows that information transfer is bound by a physical functional necessity, sufficient memory. What does information processing require? There's required information for accomplishing the task. In our example, the initial values of a and b. There are required physical resources to ensure the required information is sufficiently available for processing. In our example, the 3 variables, including the temporary variable. And there's also required context. Temporary variable must be set equal to the value of one of the other variables as the first step in the function, for example. And there is a required intelligent actor to design the system with the required context, the human defining the function and variables and their relationship to each other. So how can we use this information? Let's say we were looking at a machine and all we could see was a black box, but we know the box is performing the swap function. Well, we now know it'll require using at least 3 physical places in memory to accomplish the task. And you know someone clever has figured that out and accounted for it. Now, just to illustrate the point, let's look at this swap function one more time. Again, we have our 2 blocks of memory, each with a number. The left block with a 3 and the right block with a 7. We'll need to get rid of the 3 and put a 7 there. Then we'll need to get rid of the 7 and put what goes in the right block? A 3, of course. We can easily perform this task without the third variable. How can we accomplish that? Wouldn't that tell us that someone's already figured out this functional necessity of having sufficient memory and its relationship to the information and contextual requirements for our brains to be capable of completing such a task? We know someone clever is responsible for that. So thinking back on the definition of life provided by Paul Davies, he summarizes by saying that the information processing capabilities of life is weird. What does weird mean anyway? According to Oxford Languages, weird is defined as suggesting something supernatural. Similarly, unnatural or unearthly. I prefer to use the word designed. So that's it for my proof that humans were designed by a non-human intelligence. Hopefully you heard something new, were inspired to think something new, or at least got to laugh at something new. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I really appreciate it, and I'm happy to hear any feedback. Take care.